We're not gonna be but 15 minutes, Jeff.
Yeah. Hello and good evening, everybody. We are here on November the 23rd at 6 o'clock for our monthly forum on the tax rollback election. I am Mayor Keith Bell here with you tonight, as I promised to be, and as I will be every month up until the election, so that we can have a dialogue with one another about taxes, about a way forward, about how we solve some of the issues that we have in our city as it relates to those investments that we've made in our police department and other departments. And this tax rollback election is very, very critical to what we are trying to do and to what we are trying to establish. I am here tonight, as well as interim city manager, Chief Randall Argon. And there are members here tonight from our community that may or may not have questions. And so we will entertain those questions here very shortly. But let me read us into what we are discussing tonight, and certainly we'll allow, if he so chooses, Chief Randall Argon to add his commentary as it relates to his knowledge and his opinion on those matters of today. Certainly, we have just completed this summer our 2021-2022 fiscal year budget. We set a tax rate, we, the council, set a tax rate at about 55 cents. That tax rate, and let's be clear, that tax rate has not changed in 3 years. The tax rate that the council sets has not changed in 3 years. However, our valuations have changed, meaning the value of your house has changed, and it has increased significantly over the past 2 years. Those values are assessed by an entity that we know as the Galveston County Central Appraisal District. We have no bearing on that body other than voting for members of that board. We get a chance to elect one member of that board, but the board then goes through the process of evaluation of our properties here in Lamarque, as well as those properties all throughout our county. And as I said before, those valuations have increased significantly on your property, on my property, and apparently on properties throughout this county. When you have higher valuation, it tends to generate more tax revenue. When the valuation of your property increases, it generates more tax revenue. And at that point, there has to be decisions that have to be made. This council has decided to hold the tax rate the same so that we can realize investments in our police department, chiefly, in our fire department, as well as in our public works department. And we did that because over and over again, throughout every listening tour that we have been a part of throughout the election season that we all campaigned in, throughout emails, text messages, phone calls, meeting neighbors in the community, there has been a need that has been communicated to myself and the rest of our council to feel safer in our community. That was the biggest need that our citizens have expressed to us. And so when we had an opportunity to invest in our police department, because the facts of our city are that we are significantly more exposed to and the victims of violent crime than other cities our size across our entire state. We tend to have more violent crimes. That's a fact. That's not fiction. The fact is, earlier this spring and for quite some time, we have been inundated with reports of gunshots being heard throughout every area of our community. That's something that has been prevalent in our community. We know that there have been young men dying by the hands of gun violence in our community at an alarming rate. We know that our police department has just been involved in an officer-involved shooting about a year ago this season. And so we have tremendous challenges with crime in our community. We have known this for quite some time. We've heard it from our constituents. We've heard it from our police department. We've heard it from experts in the law enforcement field. And the council had to make a decision based on the needs of our community. The budget that we prescribed for the police department up until this year was insufficient. And we know that it was insufficient because crime still persists. Now, I happen to think that our police department is the best police department in the county. I think the men and women of the Marque Police Department are far superior than any other police department in our county, and I would stack them against any other police department in our county in any scenario. But there are two things that our police department needs to do their jobs. Number one, they need leadership. They need leadership. And we've heard from you. And there has been a response. This council has set a course that has provided leadership for our police officers. And we have already seen amazing results from the leadership change. Not that the council changes leadership, but the city manager changes leadership. And former interim city manager Chase Carey has appointed Chief Randall Oregon as our police chief. The second thing that a police department needs to do their job adequately and effectively is resources. And those resources many times have to come from a fiscal perspective, right? We have to invest in our police department. We can't expect them to resolve issues of gun violence if we have not given them the necessary resources to do so. We can't expect them to prevent crime if we have not given them the resources to do so. We can't expect them to solve crimes and move criminals toward prosecution if we have not invested in them fiscally. And so again, this 55-cent tax rate that the council has not changed has generated additional tax revenue. Those are two very different things. Many folks might believe, and they might share with you that the council has raised your taxes, and all of this is semantics, really. The council has not raised your tax rate. There has been additional tax revenue generated from the Central Appraisal District's valuation of your properties. And now, again, like I said, the council has had to make a decision. And the decision that this council has made in a resounding fashion is that we will invest in our police department because we endeavor as a council to make our city the safest city in Texas. That is the mission. That's the goal. That's the vision, because that's what our citizens have communicated to us throughout the entire time that we have been running for office, campaigning, and listening to the issues of our community. And so, friends, really, this discussion about taxation is really a discussion about public safety. That's really what it is. Many of us want to believe that this is about taxation and about lowering our taxes to the lowest possible point. And I get it. I do. I am a tax-paying citizen on my home and on my business property. I know what that feels like. I understand the burden. And certainly we are here in a period of inflation. I believe inflation is at its highest point in 30 years. I believe is what the talking points are in the news media. And certainly that is a difficult proposition to see everything, the cost of everything around you going up, and your ability to realize additional financial resources stagnant or even on the decline. Many of our the members of our community they live on fixed incomes, and we get it. I get it. I understand where we're coming from. Let me just say to you, myself personally, I grew up in Galveston, Texas, in public housing. And certainly I went without meals for days at a time. I was one of the poor folks in our community. My family was. I've seen more than my share of pink bills and disconnect notices. And I've lived through periods of times where we did not have lights in my family. I get it. Inflation is on the rise and it's scary. But friends, let me tell you this about inflation. Whenever you see inflation, any law enforcement professional will tell you crime is following inflation. Anytime there is increased inflation, crime is increased also, because people are trying by any means at their disposal to take care of their families, even at the point that those means become illegal. And so we get the idea of inflation, but we also understand that crime follows inflation. And so we have to make a choice here. We have to choose whether or not we are serious about making our city the safest city in Texas. We have to choose to support our police department. That's not always an easy thing. Those can be serious sacrifices. But if we want to be safe, if we want to do everything in our power to be a safer community, those are investments that we have to make. Those are investments that are necessary for us to move our community forward to a place that we can all feel safe. I'll say this, and then I'll see if Chief Argonne certainly would have some things that he'd like to add. I think that our community is ready to move forward. I think that we're ready to move forward. I think that we're ready to accept the challenges ahead. I think that we're tired of feeling the ways that we feel when we move throughout our community, and we want better. Now, and let me say this, roughly, and these are rough figures. If you have a $150,000 home, roughly, you're looking at a difference of about $10 a month. $10 a month. That's $120 a year. That is a lot of money. I'm not even kidding you when I say that. $10 a month can go into our gas fuel tanks. $10 a month can feed our families. $10 a month can go toward other issues that we face within our family unit. But imagine, if you will, how you would feel if having saved $10 a month, something catastrophic would happen to your family member. Crime would occur on your street. Shootings, violence, drug trade, and all other sorts of issues that we face. What happens if those crimes ended up on your street, in your neighborhood, and perhaps in your own home? Would you be willing to give $10 then? Because then, my friends, it'll be too late. So I believe wholeheartedly in the investment that we're making in our police department. And as I say that, I certainly want to ask Chief Randall Argon to talk to us about perhaps some of the things that he experiences as a police chief and when it comes to budget and crime.
Thank you, Mayor. You're absolutely right about the need for more resources for the police department. You know, I always talk about funding and taxes and, you know, it's even infrastructure, which I'm responsible for now also. You either pay now or you pay later. If you don't fix your plumbing and your pipes in the street, and it's going to mount, and you'll have a catastrophe. You'll have pipes caving in like they do now. Same thing with the police department. I want to say this: the property tax that we're talking about, this was all talked about in the budget hearings. This money that would have went to the police department for personnel and so forth, it wasn't just a zooming in, the mayor picking on the police department. Those resources that we were going to receive, which are 4 officers, 2 street crimes and the ID and the narcotics officer, that was pre-planned based on if we get the money, the revenue stream, we're going to do that. So it wasn't just like the mayor. I've heard the story on the street that we're zooming in on the PD and picking on them. No, that was all planned in advance. So I wanted that to be crystal clear to everybody. Our crime rate is definitely over the top. We, in the Safe City Initiative, Phase 2, which took place November 15th, I clearly showed that we're higher than most of the cities in our county and in our state. We're property rates double the state rate. I mean, and our violent crime rate is over the top above the state rate. So it's there, and we beat all the communities on that one thing, and it's called crime rate. We're higher. As we talked about in Phase 2, Mayor, we talked about the causes of crime. The FBI states there's about 13 things that cause crime. It could be transportation, even climate. We can't control climate. But of all the 13 things, there's only 2 things that the PD can control as far as crime. And that's the effective strength of the police department, the people, the human resources that are the cops on the street, and the administrative and investigative status of the department. So those are the only 2 of the 13 factors that we can control. So we need help. We need people. We need resources. We need equipment. If we don't get the equipment and the people, we're going to suffer. And, you know, as the mayor mentioned, $10 a month, $120 a year. I mean, we have to do it. Cities that have the resources to fight and prevent crime, they realize a long time ago that it needs to be funded. And if we lack that, we're going to be hurting. You're going to be unsafe. So, Mayor, thank you for doing all this for us and having this forum, letting people understand, let the citizens understand why we need to come up with the funding, because it pertains to your safety, my safety, everybody's safety that live in Marque.
Thank you, Chief. Let's do a couple things here really quickly, and then we're going to open it up for any questions that folks might have. Let's be clear. We're at 55 cents. Again, we did not raise our tax rate at all. The rollback rate is 47 cents. And what the rollback rate actually says is 47 cents is the rate in which you would generate the same amount of resources as you generated last year. That's all the rollback rate is. It says if we go to 47 cents, you will raise, City of Lamarck, the same amount of tax revenue as you raised last year. And many people might say at that point, well, that's good. Let's do that. But we stop at that place and that place alone, not taking into account salaries have went up, fuel costs have went up, resources have went up, the hot and cold mix, the things that we use to repair the streets, those things have went up. Health insurance has went up. See, there are always costs that are going up, even in our city, in the same way that they go up in our homes. And so what we're saying is we want to keep revenue the same, even though there are other costs that are going up. So the rollback rate is from 55 to 47 cents. That is 8 cents. That's an 8 cents difference. That is the largest rollback rate in this county. And some people say, other cities have rolled back, and that's true. Other cities have. Friendswood did not, but other cities have, and I don't think that Kemah rolled back either. Other cities have rolled back, but when people tell you that, I want you to understand that what they're saying to you is League City rolled back 4 cents, or Texas City rolled back 2 cents. There is a huge difference between 8 cents and 2 cents. A huge difference. You're talking about 8 cents being over $1 million in revenue, a $13 million budget that we have in Lamarck is having to lose over $1 million in revenue. All the while, everything else that we're doing in our city, the price tag is going up. I want you all to get that. Everything else in our city, the price tag is going up. And we're proposing, some of us, to keep our rates, our revenue, the same. And that is causing another potential problem. Now, let me just share with you. I want to do what we did chronologically. I want to share that with you as quickly as possible. And then I want to talk to us a little bit about frequently asked questions that I've heard throughout the community. So let's share. Again, we all campaigned for office, either in last fall in Casey McAuliffe and Joe Compion's case, this spring in my case, in Michael Carlson's case, and in Kimberly Yancey's case. Overwhelmingly, we all heard do something about the crime, do something about the crime. We also heard do something about the easements and the ditches and the right-of-ways. But I'll tell you about how we were able to solve that problem. Do something about the crime. The budget process started at the beginning of the summer. That's when the city manager's office got together with all of the department heads and they began to craft a budget. I believe the end of July, and the end of July is when we begin our budget workshops. A budget workshop is when the council gets on the dais with the city manager and the department heads are out front, and we go through every department's budget line by line. We had 5 budget workshops. And incidentally, friends, all of these workshops are done in public. That means that everybody can come and sit down and hear the budget workshop. That means that you could have gotten on YouTube. That means that you could have gotten on Zoom. That means that you could have came in person. That means that you could have viewed these budget workshops after even those budget workshops were done if you access our website, and you could have turned those on channel 16. And in fact, there were 4 or 5 citizens that came to these budget workshops and they took notes. They took notes throughout. 5 budget workshops. The first budget workshop, day 1, we dealt with the police department. We had not heard from Cheryl Johnson at that point. We had not heard anything about a rollback rate at that point. We had not heard anything about an effective tax rate at that point or anything. The first department was the police department. And we took what we learned from our community and we added resources to that department to reflect the needs that the citizens had said to us. We put in place a deputy chief so that that person can be focused on the issues of crime in our community. A police chief has to focus on the administrative duties, and they're meeting with all sorts of people in all sorts of situations. A deputy chief is there to make sure that the issues of the day are resolved. We added a detective because we know that the stats say 25 plus unsolved murders in our city through no fault of our detectives. They are overworked and overwhelmed. 300 unsolved felonies through no fault of our detectives. They are some of the best group of people you ever want to meet and skilled at their job. But 3 folks cannot solve 25 plus murders and 300 plus felonies. It just doesn't work. So a deputy chief and a detective. And then we saw that there was a problem with drugs in our community, and we added a narcotics detective so that we would bolster our narcotics division because of what we heard from the community. And then we added 2 street crimes officers, and their role would be to be flexible enough to address any issues of crime, whether they be types of crime or crime in certain geographical locations, immediately. And those were the 5 positions we added based on the feedback that we had when we engaged the community. 10 new police cars. Those 10 new police cars were a direct result of knowing that many of our police cars, many of our police officers had to jump their police cars before they went on a call. And if you're sitting on city council and you hear from your police department that they're having to jump their vehicles before they respond to a call, common sense says as a council person, we need to get our folks new police vehicles. That's common sense. We also added a social worker type position and mental health resources to our police officers, because it is incredibly difficult to put your life on the line every day and still be sane. And I know that not because I was a police officer, but I know that because I was a firefighter. And I understand that dynamic. I also know that because I am a dad to 2 police officers. And when they call me and let me know that they're going on their shift, I worry for their safety. And I hear the call, I hear the conversations from my children about their day-to-day task in the police department. So I know how much of an issue it is for our officers to receive adequate mental health. All of this was on day 1 of the budget workshop. We had 5 of those. It was not until budget workshop number 4, I believe, maybe late day 3, early day 4, that this idea of a tax rollback came into play, because that was the first time that we had heard from Cheryl Johnson. And the original tax rollback rate was 29 cents. We were going from 55 cents to 29 cents. And some other calculation that the state implements in these cases that none of us could possibly understand in an 8-hour course was applied, and it got us to 47 cents. But that's still not adequate to resolve the issues that we face. Marque is a small city with big city problems, a small city with big city crime. And we have to support our police officers. Now, 5 budget workshops, not one citizen. Listen, there are over 18,500 citizens in this city, about 11,000 registered voters. Out of 18,500 plus citizens, out of 11,000 plus registered voters, not one person got up and spoke against a tax rate during the budget workshop. Not one. They didn't call in. They didn't email us. They didn't send a letter. They didn't wave at us on the street. They didn't meet us at our homes. They didn't see us in the grocery store. Not one person complained about the tax rate. Then we had 2 budget hearings. A budget workshop is when we put pen to paper. A budget hearing is when we sit in these seats and we listen to whatever you have to say at the podium about the budget. You could have said, the budget is too big. You could have said, I want a $5 million budget, not a $13 million budget. You could have said, I don't want any body in public works. You could have said, I want to add 15 people to the library. You could have said whatever you wanted to say in the budget hearing process. Again, 2 budget hearings, 18,500, 11 plus registered voters. Not one person spoke. 4 tax rate hearings. 4 tax rate hearings. A tax rate hearing is a hearing that says we are going to keep the tax rate at 55 cents. If you disagree or agree, come to the podium. 4 of those. The state law only requires 1 of those. The council gave 4 of those. And out of 18,500 plus people, 11,000 plus registered voters, only 1 person got up to speak. That 1 person suggested that we might possibly be able to lower the tax rate to 53 cents, not 47, to 53 cents. Out of 18,500, 1 person said, maybe we can get it to 53. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but it seems to me if we had 5 budget workshops, 2 budget hearings, 4 tax rate hearings, if we had all of those opportunities for people to speak to us as a council and only 1 person out of 18,500, 1 person out of 11,000 registered voters spoke against the tax rate, you would think that the majority says we are okay with this. You would think, because nobody ever said anything else about it. Which brings up another point, friends. Why didn't they say anything about it? If it was such a problem, why didn't anybody write a letter, an email, or anything? You ought to ask yourself that. Perhaps this is not about a tax rate. Perhaps this is about something deeper for them. And not everybody that signed a petition. Good people signed a petition, and all of those folks that signed a petition are good people. Not one of them, in my opinion, are bad people. But they have been misinformed. This is not about a tax rate for some of us. This is about something deeper. Because if it were about a tax rate, then we would have heard every chance, we would have heard people talking to us when we had an opportunity to do something, talking to us about a tax rate, and they didn't. So I want you to think about that as we move forward in this process. Why didn't they come and talk to us? Why did they wait until we decided and then move forward with their plans? It makes you wonder what that's about. Now, let's talk about some frequently asked questions. Why is it that our rate is at this point 55 and other cities' rates are lower? Well, that's an easy question. It's about valuation. It always has been about valuation. League City's property is valued higher than ours. Friendswood's property is valued higher than ours. Texas City's property is valued higher than ours. Dickinson's property is valued higher than ours. The higher the valuation, the lower you can move your tax rate. The higher the valuation of your property, the lower you can move your tax rate. Our property, although it has been valued higher than it has been ever, is still not valued to the same level of cities around us. Not arguing whether it should or should not be. I'm just telling you the facts. And that's been part of our problem. Do you not know that I believe it's the city of Alvin has a 75-cent tax rate. Alvin does. The city of Pearsall, Texas has a 95, I believe, cent tax rate. And so that's based on valuation. The lower your valuation, the higher your tax rate, because you have to generate revenue. I speak a lot about the city of Dickinson to make a comparison. Many of you have heard this comparison, and I'll keep making this comparison until we understand it better. City of Dickinson has about 20,000 residents. The city of Marque has 18,500, 19,000. 20,000, 19,000. Dickinson has 20,000, Marque has 19,000. Similar cities, right? Dickinson has a $20 million budget, $20 million, $20 million. The city of Marque has a $13 million budget, $13 million. In the past 10 years, in the past 10 years, I believe Lamarck's budget has only increased roughly $1.5 million, $2 million. That's 10 years. Our budget has only increased by $2 million in 10 years. Go back and look at the city of League City, the city of Galveston, the city of Dickinson, and see how their budget has grown in 10 years. Dickinson, 20,000 people. Lamarck, 19,000 people. Dickinson, $20 million budget. Lamarck, $13 million budget. And get this, Dickinson has a volunteer fire department. That means that they don't even have to pay their firefighters. Lamarck has a fully paid fire department that I am darn proud of. Great group of men and women that do excellent work. We have a fully paid fire department with 2 stations. We have more services than the city of Dickinson on less money. And I want you all to think about that as we go through this discussion. A couple of things I heard on the street, and then we'll if there are any questions, we can certainly answer those questions. One of the things that I heard on the street was, why can't we go out for grant money? That's one I hear on the street. Well, there are a couple of problems with that. Grant money is great. In fact, I believe President Biden has just awarded grant money to law enforcement community here recently at about, I think, 1,000 officers. I think President Biden is in Congress are giving communities around our country 1,000 officers, not 1,000 apiece, 1,000 total. And when you get through Chicago and you get through Houston, and I'm just naming cities, you get through these bigger cities, you find that the smaller cities are getting 1 officer. And before we could even begin to understand what we would do to apply for those officers had already been filled. Those cities had already been awarded. But if you go out for grant money, you may win. There are cities all across this country that are going out for grant monies. It is a very competitive environment. You are not guaranteed to win. And even if you are guaranteed to win, even if you do win the award of grant funds to populate your police department, because that's what we're talking about, grant money to hire more officers, even if you are awarded that grant money, it is always on a sliding scale and it always has an end date. That means that the first officer, they may pay for at 90% year 1, year 2, 50%, year 3, 20%, year 4, they are on their own. And then you have to you are on your own. And then you have to keep them for a significant period of time. If you don't, any money that the federal government has expended toward helping you get that one police officer, we need more than one, you have to then repay back to the federal government. The takeaway, grants are very competitive. Grants present more challenges to our community in funding than they do resolve funding. And thirdly, from an intellectual place, the federal government is able to award grant funding through what they call taxation. It is the taxes that we pay to our federal government that allows our federal government to then package these fiscal resources into grant form to award them to communities. So it is your federal tax dollars coming back around to you again. It has to go through the federal government. So the more grant funding that's awarded, the greater the fiscal debt and obligation that we have to our federal government. Did y'all get that? When you see all this grant money floating around, that means that the federal government has somehow increased their taxation on us. And so to get these grant monies, we're actually paying more to the federal government in taxes. So what we're saying then is we're saying we would much rather pay more federal taxes than to pay more municipal taxes where we have direct impact on where those tax dollars will go. So if you fund the police department, you're saying, I would rather give more money to the federal government in hopes that it might boomerang to come back to benefit my city for a short period of time, rather than I'm going to invest in my own city because I know my council members, I know my police chief, I know my police officers, I have direct control over how my money is being spent. That's what we're saying when we're saying, how about we go out for grant funding? I hope we get that. I would much rather invest in the municipal government that I can touch, the city manager that I can meet with, than the president and the Congress members that I will probably never see in my life. That's what we're saying. I want to invest in municipal government, the people that I know, that I live with, that live with me in this community. Secondly, I heard, well, we can just abolish the police department and go out and let the county be our police force. Well, actually, we can't. We can't do that because our charter, and a city charter, friends, is like a constitution. The federal government has the Constitution. City governments have charters. Our charter says that we will have a police department. It is not optional. So to abolish our police department and then bring in the county, we would be violating our own charter. Everybody on this council would be removed. The city manager would be removed. And this city would have all sorts of lawsuits and difficulty even trying to move through something like that. It's impossible. I want us to get this. I want us to understand what we're dealing with. The last thing that I want to address tonight, that I've heard, and this is not against anybody. This is just trying to clarify some things that we've heard. The last thing I heard is that this is nothing but spin from the council. The council's spinning this. I've heard that a lot. The council's spinning this. They're picking on the police department. Well, there are a couple things that I need to share with you about that. It's not spin if it's factual. Anybody that thinks what I am saying or what Chief Argon or what the council has said is spin, all you got to do is go back and look at the videos. Go back, they're on our city website. Go back and look at our discussion with the police department. Go back and look at our budget workshops. Go back and look at our discussion about the tax rollback. Go back and look at every bit of tape that we have to show you that what this council is saying to you tonight and what we've said to you this summer, what Chief Argon is saying to you. Go back and look at all of this on tape. It's not spin if it happened. If it actually happened, then it's the truth. And you don't have to believe me. The tape doesn't lie. Go back in your own spare time and look at the tapes. And you'll get your answer to every question. I hope I've addressed much of what I've heard in this forum. I have discussed these things in this way because I don't see anybody here tonight that I know to be in any opposition to the tax rate that we are holding right now. If I had saw some folks that I was curious about, we would have gotten into a discussion sooner. But the folks that I see in our audience tonight are folks that have communicated to me in one way or the other, they are ready to make this investment in their city. And so with that, the last thing I want to share with you is this. In December 8th, I believe, we're going to have a tour of the police department because one of the things that I anticipate having on our ballot this May for the tax rollback election is also the consideration of our community to build a new police department for our police officers. I've been on this, and let me say this to us. I've been on this bandwagon for years, not just yesterday, not just because there's a tax rollback election. I've been on this bandwagon for years. Chief Argon was here in 2014. Chief Argon and I were talking about a new police station in 2014. Right or wrong, Chief?
Correct.
So I've been on this for years. Here's another thing I want to address. Go back and look at my record. Look at my record, the 17 years that I've been on council. 100% voting record with the police department. I've never voted against the police department ever in my life. I have negotiated contracts with them. I've met with them. And anything that they said that they needed, I was in favor of and I voted for. Go back and look at the tape of the budget workshop of 2020. It was the mayor pro tem, myself, asking the then police chief, do you need anything else from us? So let's make sure that we're not suggesting that I haven't done anything for the police department, because that's simply not true. 100% voting record with the police department. I back the blue and I'm going to continue to back the blue. Are there any questions from those? I know we all get it, but I just have to ask because this is a forum. If there are any questions, you may please come to the podium at this time. Okay, nobody got up. We're getting ready to close. this forum, again, what would this rollback do? It would be catastrophic. Those improvements that I shared, that we invested in our police department, all those improvements will be gone. You say, what happened with some of the improvements that we made in our public works? Well, we were able to save those 4 positions in public works that deal with drainage, easements, and right-of-ways, because actually drainage ditches, easements are actually utilities of the city. Without getting too complex, there are 2 sides of our budget. One side is what we call maintenance and operation, and that side is funded by property and sales tax. The other side of our budget is the debt service, or the utility side of our budget. And though that's funded by revenues that are generated through water payments, water bill payments, trash service collection, and all of those types of endeavors. We were able to take those 4 persons that would be cleaning the ditches and the easements and the right-of-ways, and move them from the maintenance operation side of the budget into the utility side of the budget, so that they can continue to be filled, because they actually help our drainage flow. They actually help our utilities flow. So we were able to do that legally. We can't do that with police officers because they don't work on drainage ditches. We can't do that with the public safety sector. Incidentally, the public safety sector makes up 60% of our budget. 60% of our budget is public safety. 70% of our budget is human resource. That means 70% of our budget is salary. So tell me then, how are we going to roll back taxes and not impact our ability to provide services? If 60% is public safety and 70% is staffing, how then do you cut $1 million out of a budget and not affect the services that are provided? And lastly, many of the people that signed the petition were people that are over the age of 65. And in this city, if you're over the age of 65, your tax obligation is frozen. Did you know that, Chief? If you live in our city and you own property in our city and you are over the age of 65, this council can raise the tax rate to $2 and you still will not see an increase on your tax bill. I want you to get that. I need to say that one more time. If you're 65 and over, it does not matter what your tax rate is or how high it rises, you will never have to pay more than you're paying right now. That is a fact. That's not spin. That's a fact. The council, a council I was a part of before this council, we froze seniors' taxes 10 plus years ago. But people are going around saying that seniors' taxes are going up. That is not true. So why would you and I, if we're seniors, why would we vote for a rollback that will severely limit our services when we don't have to pay any more for those services? Think about that. I'm going to vote to roll back taxes, and that's going to cause me to be less safe because I won't have as many officers protecting me, even though my tax obligation won't change. And it is true. If the taxes are rolled back to 47 cents, you'll see a reduction if you're a senior. But is that reduction worth it if you're a senior? When you're scared to walk out your own home, you're scared to answer your own door, you're scared to drive down your own street. Just food for thought. We fill this hour. We said that we were going to be here an hour every month. We are about at the end of our hour. Again, if we had some folks that were wanting to discuss this tax rate, this discussion would have been differently. We would have had a table down front and we would have went back and forth. But we don't have anybody here asking questions about our tax rate, just like we didn't have anybody here this summer. So as we leave you tonight, we leave you with this question: what is this really about for you? For some people, this has nothing to do with a tax rate. For some people, it does. But then there are those people that know that this is all about safety. This is all about making our city safer. And if you're one of those people that want our city to be safer, think long and hard about this vote that you're going to have to take in May. I want to thank you for sitting and listening to me, listening to Chief Argonne, and certainly your time to ask questions has not ended. You can call us anytime, and we will be right here next month in another forum like this to answer your questions or to discuss in more detail, because it's only going to get deeper from here. The rhetoric and the ideas and the issues that we try to solve, it will only get more technical and only deeper in the numbers that we have to offer you, so that you can be equipped in your decision about this tax rate. But again, you elected me to make this city the safest city in Texas, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do everything in my power to make this city the safest city in Texas, because our citizens have waited too long. And the time is now. Thank you all. Chief, do you have anything?
You covered it really well, Mayor. Accolades.
Again, God bless you. God bless this city of Lamarque. Our next time together will be December 8th, I believe. And we will have a tour of the police station. If you want to be a part of that tour, I believe they would call you, Chief Argonne, and you would be able to put them in touch with the folks that.
Correct.
Okay. December 8th, we're having a tour of the police department. I hope to see you there so that we can see how the men and women of the Lamarque Police Department work day in and day out. We stand adjourned.